Hello, this is Matt on the Moon Family Sedan channel. Attorney John Deaton says that if the SEC v. Ripple case ends up making it to the Supreme Court, which is technically possible, Ripple's going to win. They'll have an outright win there. And I'm going to share with you why Attorney John Deaton said that and share all his comments in full context. But it's an interesting perspective. Because, look, I really hope that it doesn't come to that. But yeah, fine, you'd have effectively, like, you know, quote unquote, the Ripple test effectively rather than the Howey test at that point. And so maybe it would provide some really truly positive clarity, you know, even going that route. But the timeline for that would be outrageous. I remember that when right after this lawsuit was filed, I was listening to Attorney John Deaton. That was when he just hit the scene, and he just filed his writ of mandamus against the SEC. And I remember in an interview he stated, "Look, if this goes to the Supreme Court, you probably don't want that." I'm paraphrasing here, but he said, that could take 5 to 7 years from that point in time, meaning that we could still potentially be from this point in time another 5 years out to have that concluded. Should it go that far? So what I'm frankly hoping is that whether Ripple wins or the SEC wins, I'm hoping that when it comes to the settlement terms, meaning the remedies portion, after there's somebody wins and somebody loses effectively, I'm hoping that even if the SEC wins, that they'll come to reasonable terms and allow some sort of clarity for XRP holders. And there could be a benefit to the SEC doing that potentially, because the SEC may get, they could ask for something from Ripple, including giving up the right to appeal. That could be part of the terms. So you think about this. If Ripple says, okay, we'll give it the right to appeal, you win SEC, but we got to have some sort of clarity for XRP. I don't know if that'll happen, even if the SEC wins, and that's an if. But there are a lot of ways to slice and dice this. Now, if that isn't something that would potentially happen, it's possible. I don't think it's going to happen, but you actually could see the case make it to the Supreme Court. So the good news is, according to John Deaton, should it get to that point, Ripple's going to win. But can you imagine another half a decade from now to get this thing concluded? Oh my God. Please tell me that's not going to happen. Please, dear sweet baby Jesus, please tell me that's not going to happen. But before going further, I do want to be clear, I do not have a legal or financial background of any kind. I am not offering legal or financial advice, and you definitely should not buy or sell anything because of anything I say or write. I'm just an enthusiast who enjoys making YouTube videos about crypto-related topics, but just as a hobby and just for fun. So let me share with you what led to this conversation in the first place. Here's an article from the Daily Hodl. Crypto giant Grayscale to face SEC in court to push for converting its Bitcoin investment product into ETF. And so you may recall that Grayscale, private company, they have what they call their Grayscale Bitcoin Trust. It's for accredited investors only. So that means you have to have a net worth of at least $1 million, not including your primary place of residence, or you have to have made for the previous 2 years. I think it's either 200 or 250,000 for each of the previous 2 years, and be on pace to make that again this year. And then you're an accredited investor. Basically, if you have money, you're accredited, because that makes sense barely. But anyway, so that's a limited number of people, obviously. That's not most people. So what Grayscale wants to do is convert their Grayscale Bitcoin Trust to a Bitcoin spot ETF. Because if you do that, you're talking about having it would be a similar product in theory, but it would be traded on the likes of the New York Stock Exchange and NASDAQ, for example. And everyday people can purchase it, not just accredited investors, and it would be backed by physical Bitcoin. So what this would do for Bitcoin, all these people that now have exposure to an asset class that even if they were aware of, maybe if they didn't care to jump in, they just didn't have the oomph to get, for whatever reason, to delve in. If it's just sitting there on a platform they're already using at the tip of their fingertips, like, yeah, whatever, I'll put a little money. So the exposure increases. So this is actually a big deal. The SEC has been denying for years and years and years every proposal for a spot Bitcoin ETF that's come its way. And it's at a point now where it's abundantly clear, in my humble opinion, that the SEC is certainly on this topic not operating in good faith, but that's par for the course because it's the SEC. So Grayscale actually, this past summer, sued the SEC. So check this out. Crypto giant Grayscale says the oral argument for its lawsuit against the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission will happen earlier than expected. Grayscale filed the suit last year to contest the regulator's rejection of its application to convert the Grayscale Bitcoin Trust into an exchange-traded fund. According to Grayscale, Chief Legal Officer Craig Salm, the firm expected the oral argument to start by the second quarter of 2023, but a new order from the District of Columbia Court of Appeals sets the schedule for March 7th. So that's, of course, obviously a welcome bump up in terms of timeline. That stuff doesn't usually happen from what I've seen anyway in the SEC v. Ripple case. Certainly not. If anything, it's just delay after delay after delay. Anyway, Pete's continues. The filing says the court will announce the composition of the argument panel 30 days before the date of the oral argument. It will also issue a separate order for the allotment of time for the argument. Quote, the next event to look out for will be selection of the 3-judge panel from the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals, about a month before oral arguments, end quote. The SEC argues that Grayscale's proposal to convert GBTC into an ETF did not meet standards for preventing fraudulent practices, but in an interview on CNBC's Squawk Box, Grayscale CEO Michael Sonnenschein says that the SEC's decision contributed to the current crypto fiasco. He said, quote, had the SEC already approved the spot Bitcoin ETF, allowed GBTC to convert into an ETF already, then a lot of the investor harm that you see in crypto would have been prevented. A lot of these investors would not have gone to offshore exchanges and gotten caught up in some of the businesses that are not regulated by the US the way that Grayscale is, end quote. And so, good point. On top of that, though, one of the things that just makes it so obviously clear that this is not SEC not operating in good faith, we have Bitcoin futures, and Bitcoin trading itself is allowed. There, and I'm telling you, I don't recall all. I haven't committed to memory all of the bogus nonsense SEC claims for this, so I can't rattle them necessarily off the top of my head. But I have read them before, and I've covered them on the channel. And I'm telling you, I've not seen a single good reason why this would be this would result in extra risk to market participants. Having a Bitcoin ETF when you're already allowing, because you're talking about risk. I mean, there's volatility, this and that. What is fundamentally more dangerous about a Bitcoin ETF than Bitcoin futures, or even just Bitcoin buying and selling, which is all allowed? It doesn't make any sense. It obviously doesn't make any damn sense. And so there was this very short Twitter thread shared by somebody named Andrew, and this is what prompted Attorney Deaton to say the things he said about the Supreme Court, which is why I wanted to do this in the particular order that I'm doing this. So here's what Andrew said, and then I'm going to jump into what Attorney Deaton said verbatim. So Andrew said, update, there is a possibility that the Grayscale GBTC and spot Bitcoin ETF makes its way to the Supreme Court here in the United States. Sharp legal sources are impressed with the Grayscale brief in front of the DC Circuit and believe a win is possible. Not probable, but possible. Source, reading the briefs, I've gone from this being a waste of time to they just might win. And if it does make it to the Supreme Court, the conservative court loves to smack down agency overreach. Contrary to their public stance of late, you can believe that Michael Sonnenschein and Grayscale are not in an actual hurry to convert, which is interesting. But Attorney Deaton retweeted that, and here's what he had to say. And this is where he ended up talking about the SEC v. Ripple case and why he thinks that, if it makes it that far, Ripple's going to win. So here's what Attorney Deaton said. A win is more than possible. I put the odds of a Grayscale win before the DC Circuit at 50-50 and a win before the Supreme Court at 75 to 80%. Under the law, the SEC's denial of a spot Bitcoin ETF while allowing both a futures ETF and short ETF is arbitrary and capricious. And after the Supreme Court's decision in West Virginia versus EPA, I have zero doubt that the current makeup of the U.S. Supreme Court will rule in favor of Ripple if it goes that far. The SEC did not limit its allegations to only apply to Ripple's sales of XRP. It went too far. Spot on, Attorney Deaton. The SEC says everything that XRP touches, the entire ecosystem, unrelated participants, the entire ecosystem, that's I guess that's a common enterprise. What? Everything? It's just amazing. Legal precedent makes it very clear. The SEC, in going after Ripple, they should be citing specific transactions. They're not. They're saying everything. That's too far. It's very obvious. If this goes to the Supreme Court, I think Attorney Deaton's right. Now, in a way, I kind of hope that it doesn't, because if it does, oh my God, you could be looking at another half a decade. I just no, I don't have it in me. I mean, I would have it in me, but my God, no. Can you imagine? Because I don't even know what that would. I don't even know what that would mean in terms of price action in the short term. And by the way, I want to briefly mention this as well. And this news broke just yesterday. Headline from Decrypt: SEC rejects another spot Bitcoin ETF bid by ARK and 21 shares. I think the headline says it all. It's for the same reasons. I don't feel the need to even read this, but they smacked those down. The SEC, they're doing what they're doing. It's dangerous. It's because we're protecting the little guy. No, you're not. No, you're not. You're denying financial opportunity. That's what you're doing, SEC. You're not protecting anybody. So again, literally just yesterday, more denials of the same thing. Supreme Court will not be having it should it go that far, though. I'm not a financial advisor. You should not buy or sell anything because of anything I say or write. That would be a very, very, very bad idea. Until next time, to the moon, family sedan.